Okay, this won't be on there. I'm gonna switch to speaker view. Okay, here we go. And then we'll just go from there. Hi, this is Henry Chamberlain, and I have Nathan Gelgud to chat with today. He is known for his comics with the New York Times about cinema and culture, and he has a new book, Real Politik or Politik. You help me with the pronunciation, Nathan. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I always just say politic, but I've
Okay.
noticed that I don't know, maybe I didn't do myself any favors with this title. It kind of trips people up.
No, just for fun. But maybe just go ahead and tell us an elevator pitch of what your book is, or the comics. What are they about for people who don't know?
Real Politic is a comic strip about a group of movie theater workers who take over their single screen theater in the name of launching a Marxist-Leninist revolution somehow via film exhibition, and it has science fiction and fantasy elements, and it was told in the form of a daily comic strip.
Now, I want to tell you that I'm just so overjoyed to be able to chat with you, especially a guest that has so much that he brings to the table. I was just chatting with Todd Webb, a cartoonist that just loves your work, and he commissioned a piece. You did a portrait of Bill Forsyth,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
He
I
commissioned
asked,
like a little comic.
yeah,
Yeah.
I asked him who was it that he, that Nathan did a portrait of, and he said, yeah, Bill Forsythe, director of Gregory's Girls. Oh, so that's like it is tugs at my heart. That's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, cool.
It's a perfect example of the power of cinema. I mean, I it can't be said so. Oh, it can't be said enough that I guess cinema is the most powerful art form there is, or the most formative or formidable, or how would you put it? Just talking about cinema and its place in the culture.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that for me, movies um became an obsession in my youth. I don't know, like when I was a kid, like watching, I watched movies the way kids watch movies, but maybe a little bit more enthusiastically than some other kids. And then when I went to college, I just went to like a big state school, but I was registering for classes and I was like late registering for classes. So I was just kind of just grabbing whatever I could get. And there was this intro to film course, and I was like, sure, I like movies. And it happened to be taught by this guy, Joseph Gomez, who wasn't really teaching intro that much at that point. I think he was teaching more like advanced film studies and also like graduate level literature courses. Anyway, I just say that because it was really fortuitous and just like I just still feel so lucky that I got Joe because he was someone who really taught me how to watch movies, really. I mean, and he was and simultaneous with that, he was someone who felt that I had an acumen for talking about and writing about movies. And then became, like friends. And I took his classes for 4 years, along with a small group of other kind of like-minded people. The filmmaker Robert Greene was one of them. Um, and that was, and then when I moved to New York, all I did was just go see movies, and I fell in with a sort of little crew of like-minded maniacs who just wanted to go to movies all the time. And that was another, like there was taking Joe's classes, and then like 4 years later there was moving to New York and just having um just being completely steeped in movie culture, because like New York is a movie going city like no other city.
Oh God, well, I envy you that. I moved to Seattle after college, and Seattle holds its own. It loves movies to death, and yeah, I know what you mean. I want to focus in on the book again and talk about the four main characters. There's Birdie, the
Yeah,
diehard revolutionary. There's Sandra, the in touch with the supernatural. She's a witch.
yeah,
There's Skip, who was the manager when it was just a movie theater before it became
right.
the People's Movie Theater,
Yeah.
and there's Hale, who he's kind of on the fence as to what to do. He's a revolutionary, but he's going to hedge his bets. What can you tell us about? how those characters took on a life of their own, or the
I don't
process of
know.
how
I
they
think
evolved.
you did a good job kind of summing up their how they're different from each other. Because sometimes to me they just I'm always wonder if I'm doing a good enough job differentiating them. Like if I want to feel like when I write a strip, I want to when I get an idea for a joke, right? Like I want to feel like, well, that could only be Birdie, or that could only be Hal, or that, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I don't want to feel like I'm just slotting in characters as mouthpieces for like a joke that I've already determined. So I'm glad to hear you kind of describe them that way because you're right, they are different from each other. Um, I don't know. I mean, they kind of like the way that those characters developed was probably just based on finding jokes every day. I mean, like, so I did this strip every day for a year, and I still do it now, but I don't do it every single day. And the thing about doing a strip every day is you're just trying to come up with an idea every day. And my rule to myself was that almost every day it should be a joke. Like it, it might not be the best joke in the world, but like you can tell, you can identify the structure of it. You can tell that it was supposed to be a joke. Um, so as you do that, you figure out how to, and lots of jokes are just putting two separate ideas and mashing them up against each other. So I maybe that's the way their personalities started to come out as I did this strip because, it would like suit the strip to have someone who's a real hardliner, right? And so like Birdie gradually became that person. And then it would suit the strip to have someone who's a little more of kind of like a sad sack. And so Hal, the duck character, kind of stepped into that role. And then Sandra is sort of she started as sort of like you remember Dr. Katz? Remember that animated show Dr. Katz?
Yeah, from the
And
80s.
Laura Silverman, I think, voiced the receptionist who was like so so like couldn't be bothered. I
Hmm.
think I was kind of thinking of I haven't watched that show since I was a kid, but I think I was kind of thinking of that character a lot with Sandra at first, that she's just this kind of like um just couldn't care less kind of showing up for work kind of character. But then I gave her these kind of supernatural abilities, and that became interesting that she's simultaneously someone who's kind of the word is failing me, but it's kind of like it's almost like a Gen X stereotype, you know.
Yeah.
But then also she has these abilities to do these supernatural things, and so that became kind of interesting to me. And she um I'm kind of rambling because nobody's asked me this before and I haven't really thought about it before, but because it all just kind of developed day by day doing a daily strip. But it was kind of fun to take her out of that mode of, eyelids always half closed, chin always in the hand, to someone who had, magic powers and wanted to figure out what to do with them. And so she had to come out of that a little bit. She had to emerge from that stereotype a little bit. And I think people really like her. So I hope I did a good job.
Yeah, you bring up Gen X, and I feel that really has that says a lot there because I think of Generation X. We were not super political, as I remember. We not super political. We were liberal, but we weren't super political, and we were kind of directionless until we latched onto something. So I see
Mm-hmm.
that's it's happening to Sandra. She finally latches onto something that she has a purpose in life or
Mm-hmm.
beyond just the routine.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I've been thinking about that stuff over lately just because um of the kind of double the two sides of the coin of the sort of no selling out, which was a big thing for us
Right.
in the 90s that you didn't sell out. And of course, the downside to that is I think a lot of us, and I was probably a little bit of a victim of this, that became like, don't be ambitious, you know,
Right. Yeah.
like don't try too hard. But the positive thing about it that is that yeah, you shouldn't sell. I mean, you shouldn't sell out. But that does, it means that you shouldn't like I don't know. Like I was talking to a friend a couple years ago about how people were all excited about the Barbie movie,
Hmm.
and I was like, kind of talking about Greta Gerwig as a director who wasn't someone who I was like super excited about before that, but she made movies as what I understand making movies to be. Like Lady Bird is like a totally watchable movie. Like she was an interesting director in that way. She did her own thing with that Little Women adaptation, even. And then I was like talking. It's like, and then I was like, then this Barbie thing, and then my friend interrupted me. He was like, "It's called selling out, dude. Like you're dressing this up a little bit." And that kind of I think about that all the time. Like, yeah, there is a simple version of how to explain this stuff. And from what I've been told or kind of like here, like um supposedly the identifier for the current generation of young people is like that's a foreign notion to them, the idea of selling out, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
their idea is to just be successful. um and so I don't know if that's true or not, because I'm not around them, so I don't want to, but like it still interests me. And as a cartoonist who's doing something that satirizes movie culture and moviegoers, I think I play with that stereotype a little bit, that these characters in realpolitik have a sort of no sellout ethos. I mean, they have a revolutionary ethos um, that is very completely foreign to their contemporaries, you know.
Well, I'll have to admit, when I did the review of your book, I skimmed a little bit here and there because I just needed, I was so excited to get the review out, and I thought, okay, I got what it's about. And then I had time to go back and read every single comic and go back and reread it. So I've got a much
Thank you.
better appreciation of what's going on. And then I started to think, how can I frame this question? Because it's one of these big umbrella questions I like to ask about how describe to us how the cinephile and the revolutionary can commingle the sensibilities. What are you thinking? Because my thinking is a lot of people don't realize that when they say power to the people, they're talking Marxism. They might not realize it. Very diluted version, but there's a lot of Marxism that people are okay with or support, and they may not even realize it's Marx.
Mm-hmm.
So
Um, well, I mean, your question is about, I
how
guess,
is it that that you decided I'm going to make all of these film people embrace Marxism? Is it like a, a natural progression, or they're both so intertwined in
I
your
guess,
thinking?
I guess because I mean, I'm a very dilettantish communist, which means that like I don't do anything about it, you know. But when I was young, when I was a teenager, I was like really into like reading about the Black Panthers. And then when you read about well, it started with like hip hop. Like I listened to Public Enemy. And then when you listen to Public Enemy, you're like, okay, who are the Black Panthers? And then you read about the Black Panthers and you're like, oh, who's Mao Zedong? And then you read about who Mao Zedong is. And then you know what I mean? Like, um, and um, that passion's the wrong word, but just kind of that tendency of mine, I guess. I thought it would be fun to just mash it up against my obsession with movies and just make a comic about characters who are obsessed with movies, but who also have this hardliner Marxist Leninist revolutionary ambition. And to them, they just see no conflict between those two things. Like to them, and it maybe it's youthful folly, but to them, because they love movies so much and because they believe in revolution so much, those two, there's no conflict between those two things. They're just the same thing to them. And so what I found in doing the strips is that that's fertile territory for jokes. Like it's funny. Like it's
Yeah.
because it's a contradiction. You can't really reconcile those things entirely. Um, and so I think a lot of the strips you're watching them try to. Um, and there's also strips where there's at least one strip where a character wonders about if these two tendencies are truly reconcilable or not. And then there's also things that I'm genuinely interested in, like how would one make movies without a capitalist system to support movie making? Of course, it can be done, and what would it look like?
Yeah, I'm going to jump around a little bit. I got all my notes here that I wanted to stay in order, but actually, this is pretty close to where I wanted to go next. I have some examples straight from the comic strip, and one of them is the character Birdie is asking herself. That's what you just were talking about. She's asking herself, can you reconcile the two, be a film lover and be a
Yeah.
revolutionary?
Yeah.
But well, I'll just go through the list because I think this is, yeah, page 59. How does being a cinephile and being a Marxist revolution relate with each other? And I had written it as an extra note. I think that Charlie Chaplin he was like totally in with what was going on at the time. And it was modern times, isn't that the one he's pretty much, that's his manifesto for the working class person. And that's how he got, I'm thinking, because I would have to research this, but I'm just off the cuff. I'm thinking that's how he got pegged as the communist.
Yeah, I couldn't speak intelligently about the minutia of his exile and his politics. But yeah, I think you're pretty much right.
And on page 135, you go into a night at the opera and the idea of regular folks being able to use the instruments of the professionals. So
Hmm.
that's a big thing, and I kind of can see it from both ways. I think, well, yeah, it would be great to have everyone involved because some people are left feel like they get left behind. They shouldn't, but then you want excellence too. So I'm sometimes I feel like I do want meritocracy, but I know that's a loaded subject to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's any such thing. And I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if you're asking a specific question or not, but I guess it has me thinking about what that strip about the Marx Brothers movie is talking about is sort of the idea of I don't know. I don't really know where to go with that,
No,
honestly.
that's fine. Okay, and this so another question I wanted to ask you, you've kind of already answered is you're satirizing this youthful idealism, but at the same time, part of you is rooting for these characters too, because there's a part of you that is all for it, right? Am I right about that? Or
For me,
yeah,
yeah, not just part of me, all of me.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I've heard that some people who have like stumbled across the strip online can't tell if I'm satirizing and making fun of these characters or if I um, sort of am one of these characters. And I think that's a good place to be as a cartoonist and a satirist,
Yeah.
where it's not always immediately apparent, or where the satire can kind of cut through multiple elements of what you're doing. But yeah, I have complete sympathy and empathy for their ambitions.
And there's some which
I couldn't do it if I didn't, like I
yeah,
would. Why would I don't want to? Why would I? I couldn't spend time with them every day if I thought that they were like, I mean, they are ridiculous, but they're not. But they're admirable to me.
okay, I like that a lot. So I think some of the jokes are tongue in cheek, and in some might be informed by something else going on that I'm not aware of. Like page 137, choosing what movie you wish to see is elevating the ego over cinema. Now, is that just hot air, or is there something to that?
I think in that strip, I was thinking of, I was just, I mean, it's I was just thinking about the idea of the way that movies are watched. Okay, so these characters are basically like um way more interested in a version of watching movies that existed like when I was their age. Like when I talked about living in New York and we would go see what was in theaters. Like that is like what was being programmed, mostly like retrospective stuff and repertory stuff, right? So we
Yeah.
were seeing movies presented to us. You know, if Film Forum was showing all the Fassbinder movies, we'd see all the Fassbinder movies. MoMA is showing all the Nicholas Ray movies, we'll go see all the Nicholas Ray movies. We'll go see all the Robert Altman movies. And we'll like create this body of information that we have now. Anthology Film Archives is showing what you know, take your pick. I mean, and we would follow the programming. Now of course, when you do that, there is someone else picking for you. There's a programmer picking for you, but what you're doing is immersing yourself in a culture of movies and absorbing it and processing it, and you're doing it with other people and you're talking about it. And that's the opposite of what most of us do now, which is sit down and try to pick something on our TV or our computer, where the possibilities seem absolutely limitless. And so and when I did that strip, I was kind of like thinking about, how do I carry that idea? How do I put that idea into these characters' mouths in a kind of a funny or extremist or polemical way? And I was thinking about, well, when you sit down at the computer or the TV and you are going to decide what you want to watch, that's why I talked about that. I don't know what I don't remember what the phrasing is in the comic, but when I talk about it as an active ego, it makes it about you. It makes it about, what do I want? How can the screen cater to me? What mood am I in? What am I going to choose for me? What is this? You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
it becomes entirely about you. What are you in the mood for? What do you want? You, the consumer, right?
yeah.
And that's a different experience. That's a completely different experience to what I did, you know, when I was going to movies all the time, or, you know, and of course there's a certain privilege there. I mean, not everybody can live in a city that presents all this great movies to you. Um, but I do think there's an sort of a anti-cinematic experience to choice, to so much choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I love the sense of it, not just the sense, but the actual adventure of discovering movies. And that is something from an older generation. And just going to a movie theater and being there with a bunch of other people at film festivals, but just an everyday experience. It's not happening that often. I've gone into movie theaters lately, and usually it's just one or two or three people, and you've got this barca lounger type of seating
Yeah,
seat.
which is another thing that the characters like to make fun of sometimes. Yeah, the idea that like, I mean, but that's a similar thing, you know. I think there's a strip about that. The idea of this comfort at movie theaters is really strange to me. This idea that you're supposed to be like in your living room, basically,
Hmm.
um, and that you're supposed to be sort of swaddled, and given, you know, a hamburger and a beer, you know, brought to you. Um, and it's just like, that's not what, I don't feel like that's what the way we should be watching movies. Now I go to those theaters and I'll order something, and I'm not, that's fine. You know, it exists and there's no reason not to do the thing that exists, but it's just not the kind of movie. I think the chairs should be uncomfortable, and I think the temperature shouldn't be quite right. And I think that you should be aware of your body while you're watching a movie, and you should be aware of yourself while you're watching a movie. And I think you should be thinking while you're watching a movie. You know, I don't think you should be like half asleep. I mean, there's theaters that give you like blankets, I've heard. I mean, come on,
Oh, wow.
you know.
That's new for me.
I heard something about it. I don't know.
Well, I like that idea of being so in tune and your body and your mind, but also losing yourself in the movie. Do you like that experience? I'm sure you
Oh,
do
I don't
too.
know. I
You
don't.
don't? Oh,
No, because the idea, and these characters talk about this. I think you should be engaging, and you should be engaging with what a movie's doing and what it's trying to do to you, and ways in which it operates in the world, and
sure.
um, and how it's positioning itself, and what it's trying to communicate to you. And the idea of getting lost in a movie is essentially an emotional experience where you're saying, okay, I think that saying getting lost in a movie usually means relating to the lead character so much that you are them, right? And you
Oh,
are having
that.
those experience. And that's antithetical to analysis, and that makes the job of the movie just to trick you. It doesn't make the job of the movie to um, say things. It just makes the job of the movie to comfort you. Even if it's making you sad or or anxious or cringe or whatever, it's still essentially an act of escape. And what these characters are trying to talk about is that movies are not escapism. Movies are a way of engaging with the world, and you can't engage with the world if you're just emotionally. I mean, this is a basic Brechtian principle, that you should be aware of the fact that you're watching a movie the entire time that you're watching the movie, or in Brecht's case, the play, which I think in this strip at one point a character gives kind of like a diatribe about that and relates it to the idea of comfort in a movie theater, that you shouldn't be comfortable because you should be aware of what you're doing the whole time.
Oh, sure. I totally agree. I don't want to be cocooned and with an IV being fed things and whatever. It's too much, but I do like moments where I slip into to the world of the movie. But we can leave it at that. Another one, page 139, you speak about image being more important than narrative. And I think about some of the great directors in my mind. I don't know where Orson Welles falls in the pantheon these days, but I would think of him as someone who married image and narrative because he was a man of the theater, so he was constantly thinking about the story, but he also was so much a visual person. Wasn't he like an ideal combination of a visual and narrative, or am I
Yeah,
barking up the
sure,
wrong
but I
tree?
think I think the characters in Realpolitik are talking about um they're polemicists, and so they're talking about how you should watch a movie as a series of images and you should be decoding those images. In other words, the images are always doing some kind of work. This it's like a semiotic principle, which is not something that I can talk about intelligently, but that you're doing a decoding of symbology when you watch a movie. So you're not just watching the way in which an image presents another piece of narrative. You're watching each image as a piece of culture, as it exists in the culture, and that means the image is political, and that means the image is dissectable, and that means the images falls under your analysis. Um, and so I don't think that characters are really concerned with how well a filmmaker marries the concepts, or marries the ambitions of storytelling and image as much as they are interested in the way that a series of images works in the culture, or works on the screen, or works among the audience, or what have you. I think that they're trying to divorce people from the idea that what you should be doing is watching for how well a director tells a story, and that what you should be watching is what happens on screen and decoding it. And so, like, these characters certainly have their cinematic heroes, and they'd probably count Orson Welles among them. But I don't think that what they want to do is talk about um, they don't want to talk about the supremacy of Wells as someone who represents excellence. They might talk about Wells as sort of Wells the person is sort of a synecdoche or a symbol of the collection of movies that he left. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It might be sort of a foggy. It might be a useless distinction almost, but I don't think they're interested, and I'm not lately very that interested either in how great a filmmaker is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Uh, but I'm interested in the work of a director as sort of a through line to find interesting work.
And then my last one, directly connected to the comic strip, is auteur theory is just a director's personal stamp. That's something Birdie wants to make clear. And it doesn't mean that the director wrote and directed and has full control. And I found that interesting because again, I think of Orson Welles as somebody who wanted to be an auteur director, and when it was on his terms, he was able to do that. But
Yeah, auteur, the use of the word auteur at some point became started to mean a filmmaker who has complete control over every aspect of their movie. And the idea of the auteur, as it was imported from France with the so-called auteur theory, um, it's almost the exact opposite. The auteur theory was that this was a way of championing and talking about Hollywood, mostly Hollywood film directors who worked in the studio system, like Howard Hawks or Alfred Hitchcock. And it was a way of saying that despite the fact that these directors don't have full control over the movies, you can still see that they're the true author, aka auteur, of the movie. And so it was a way of saying, it was a way of elevating movies as an art form by giving them an author, right?
right,
Because what those critics, Truffaut, Godard, etc., and in the United States, Andrew Sarris, were trying to do was to say movies are an art form worthy of analysis the same way that literature is. And so Godard and Truffaut and company would compare filmmakers to William Faulkner or Vincent van Gogh or whoever, take your pick. But they were doing this all in the context of saying, despite the fact that the studio is ultimately in control of the product, you can still see a through line with their movies of the stamp that they've put on them, right? And
yeah,
so it's just like one of my little bugaboos that since then, auteur theory has like come to be, or auteur, the word auteur has come to mean somebody like, I don't know, like Paul Thomas Anderson or something. He's a true auteur because he's like doing everything. And it's like, that's the opposite of what it meant. You know what I mean?
yeah, okay,
And it's like, I don't, it also is like the idea of a filmmaker having absolute complete control over every element of the movie being made is almost like antithetical to what's interesting about watching movies to me, which is that they're this weird, kind of cultural mass hallucination fever dream made up of um, multiple things where there is somebody behind it trying to put through some kind of vision, but that person is doing so through the through multiple obstacles of presented by studios or producers or audience expectation or budgeting or funding. You know what I mean? Like
hmm,
that the thing that winds up making it on screen is this strange um beast that you then have to kind of figure out what to do with. And when people talk about filmmakers as if the filmmaker who they want to admire most is the filmmaker who's controlled everything, it's like that's not, I'm not interested in that. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in a movie where it's like it's only that person. Um,
okay,
I shouldn't say I'm not interested in that. Of course, I'm interested in it. I love movies. I love all movies. I love all kinds of movies. But it's just a funny and kind of obnoxious thing. I'm obnoxious. It's an obnoxious thing that it happens, and then I'm in turn obnoxious about being corrective about it. Um, the idea that again, like just the sort of that the auteur almost came to mean the exact opposite.
Now, to round things out, I had just a handful of movies that we could just chit chat a little bit, and
Sure.
they all fall into, I think, the category of directors putting their personal stamp on their film. I think of the two big movies that Emma Stone was in. She was lucky enough to be in the two major movies of 2024, or two of the major movies, Eddington and Begonia. And does that inspire any thoughts? Those two movies and what they spoke about
I haven't
in the
seen
culture?
Begonia. I did see Eddington in the theater. I don't really see new movies that much anymore. I mean, my life is a lot different than it was back when I was young. But I don't know. What do you want to talk about Eddington? Ask me a question about Eddington.
Well, I loved Joaquin Phoenix, and I just thought Emma Stone was so smart to be able to know or have I don't know if, I think that was her own personal choices. Like I think it's the same for Elle Fanning in Sentimental Value. So that was a very intelligent choice of her to choose to be in that movie. I don't know if you've had a chance to see Sentimental Value.
No, I've seen his other stuff and I like a lot of it. Um, um, but I don't really I don't know. I've got two kids and um, it's hard to get out to the movies. Um, and I kind of feel like when you're seeing tons of movies, it becomes interesting to see all the new movies, and they become interesting in the context because I used to like when I had some awareness of what was going on in filmmaking, like in broadly, like very broadly speaking, like around the world. And I was reading film journals and I was, you know what I mean? It
Yeah,
made every movie sort of more, every movie was in conversation with with the other movies, you know?
yeah.
Like this movie's doing this, but this movie's doing this. And it's this movie did it better and or this the way that this movie handled it made a lot more sense. And this is how this movie fails and this movie succeeds. And now it's so piecemeal that I almost like just don't bother. But it's not because I'm not interested. I mean, Eddington was kind of a uh I really was I enjoyed like the first act or so when the way that it was setting up the relationships in that town and also the way that it treated um COVID skepticism, I thought was I really I enjoyed it because the sort of liberal narrative of COVID skepticism was that people who didn't want to wear masks or people or take vaccines were idiots, and it was like it sort of denied a lot of things about the way that our country works to be so dismissive of people whose lived experience made them suspicious of major drug companies and the United States government. Um, and it became, oh, you're selfish, you're a selfish idiot. Um, and Eddington, I felt like did an interesting job of putting you in that headspace while simultaneously making something that was, you know, I don't know, maybe like almost like satirical, you know.
Hmm.
And so it had a nice tension between a sort of genuine humanity and empathy and what became a cartoonish kind of I know like I heard somebody talking I heard was listening to some podcast and somebody was talking about how like there's this theory about Eddington that at a certain point it kind of becomes what if every it just becomes Joaquin Phoenix's fever dream of what if every conspiracy theory was true, and he kind of ends up in this world where everything that, every possible idea we have about, an Antifa super soldier and um, I don't know, it's been a while, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that. I like that it's this movie that's sort of like taking like, let's take everything that's happening in this, let's base a movie, you know, it takes place like 3 or 4 years previous and just take absolutely everything that was happening in that moment and mash it up into this like insane concoction. And I don't think it ends up um I don't think it ends up working that well, but I'll take it. I'll take I'll accept the gamble,
Hmm.
So I enjoyed that about it.
Well, to close things out, I have two more movies, and one we may not even talk that much about because it's a very conventional commercial mainstream movie the antithesis of what the real politic gang would be wanting to talk about. Ella McKay. Have you heard anything about it? I don't imagine you've seen it, or maybe you have. I don't
I
know.
don't know what is this. I don't know this movie. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just stumbled upon this. Jamie Lee Curtis. I just love her because she's just so, and it's so infectious when she gets enthusiastic about something. She's just a wonderful person. And she said she cried when she got the part to be in Ella McCabe, which was James L. Brooks's latest movie
Oh,
af-
okay.
after being in retirement, I guess, or whatever. And I think it's a gem for what it is. That's how I'd put it. It's an old time classic comedy, something that Frank Capra would have done. Ella McKay is a very straight shooter, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and she stumbles into becoming the governor of her state, and she really shouldn't be governor, and hijinks ensue. It's very it's more like a play that's being filmed than a movie, and it,
Hmm.
it fits in with what James L. Brooks was doing in the '80s, or it could have been it would have fit right in the 1940s. It's very much a creature of if you want that kind of movie, then that's what you're going to get. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it hasn't done well at all. It
We
hasn't
watched.
resonated.
You mentioned Capra, and a few weeks ago we watched. We didn't make it all the way through, but we watched like the first half of It's a Wonderful Life with our kids, and that movie was really big in my house as a kid. It was like the Christmas movie, you know.
Sure.
And I watched it a lot when I was a kid, and I really liked it. And I hadn't seen it in a really long time, and watching it this time, I realized that how I think it was really formative for me because there's all this stuff in about it. There's like, he works at um, the movie is essentially about giving up individualism for the greater good. I mean, it's about
Mhm.
this character who's like, he's dissatisfied with his life because he never pursued his dreams. But the attitude of the movie is essentially that pursuing your dreams is an individualistic, selfish thing to do when he can serve the greater good by working at his dad's, small loans business. Which, when there's that run, this stuff that as a kid you can't understand it, like
Right.
run on the bank. It's like, what is, you don't have no idea what that means, right? But what happens is, the there's a run on the loan business that he runs, basically because they're scared that all the money's going to go away because of the evil capitalist Mr. Potter. And Jimmy Stewart gives this speech about, like, I don't have your money, it's in Jim's house, and Jim, I don't have your money because it's in the school, and I don't have your money because it paid for Edna's surgery. And like, it's purely a scene about collectivism, and about how, like, it's essentially like, well, you shouldn't have money, we're a community, and we should just earn money and pass it around and like help each other.
Right.
And it was something that I couldn't have explained what he was talking about as a kid. But like that idea completely, must, I think, really got through and never left. And probably informed, when I'm 16 and 17 and getting excited about, like, there's these guys called the Black Panthers, and they were these communist revolutionaries. Like, I understood, like, intuitively a through line between this kind of like radical leftist communism and the populism that was in the Capra movie.
Well, I
And that
think
might have something to do with what I'm talking about watching movies as a sequence of images,
hmm
and
that's
how
very visual. That's a very visual movie. Yeah.
but that's essentially what I was doing as a kid.
Right.
You're just watching these images march by you, and you're trying to decode them, and you don't always understand them. That's what's so frustrating about movies that cater to kids and talk down to them, is because they don't leave the kid any work to do, right? And when as a kid, when you're watching a movie and you realize it's too old for you, you don't understand what's being said in the scene, but you're taking cues from the way the scene looks to figure out what the idea is in the scene, right? So
Yeah.
that you're, as a kid, you're just like, I just want to keep watching the movie. What can I do to decode this scene and figure out what's happening in it? Um, And that kind of viewing that I did as a kid with It's a Wonderful Life, and that in that scene, I realized recently is probably one of the biggest movie watching moments in my life, and informed, like, it may have been one of the biggest influence on the way I think about the world and the way I'm oriented politically, right? And why I've now made a comic about, like, collect, communist cinephiles. Um, but that scene, I wasn't watching that scene and understanding every part of it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so it's like now when we praise clarity, or want movies to, like, they have to cohere or they have to totally make sense. Maybe that's part of the reason I'm suspicious of it, is because I feel like you can probably have a more formative and real experience with something that you're having to do the work of figuring out what the sequence of images mean, in the way that I did when I was a kid, where I couldn't understand the words, you know, the things that he's talking about, the economic work, financial workings that he's talking about are completely over my head.
Yeah.
I understand that that guy's rich and that makes him a bad guy, right? And I understand that Jimmy Stewart doesn't have a lot of money and he's trying to get people to share money, and that makes him a good guy. Um, but I'm doing that just by piecing together the cues of the movie's giving me.
Well, I think that that's a movie everyone should see. I can't recommend it highly enough, even though it might be it might appear to be cornball. It's not that. And there's one scene in it that always gets me. When I was a little kid, it got me, and I just saw it recently, and it still gets me, and it probably gets you. Is when it's Jimmy Stewart as a boy, and he's working at a drugstore,
Mhm.
and the pharmacist messes up the prescription, and
Yeah.
it's poison. And he goes up to the pharmacist and he says, I need to tell you, I need to, I think that's when the pharmacist strikes him. And
Oh, he beats him up. Yeah, like
yeah,
multiple times. Yeah.
well, it's not too many. It's one really bad blow to the ear.
Uh,
And then he catches himself and he's mortified and and then he hugs him. He says, I'm so sorry.
uh,
That always gets me. It's getting me right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's an intense moment. I mean, I don't know if I can really add to what you said, except that um maybe there's like an empathy in that scene with the druggist, as I think he's like an alcoholic too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but in Capra's world, the alcoholic is not a jerk. He's not a bad guy. He's a guy who's been beaten down by the world. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
And so when he makes a mistake, he's also not a bad guy. He's just a guy who's like at the mercy of all these forces in the world that, like, conspire to make life extremely difficult for everybody, um, unless you're rich. And so maybe that's something that gives that scene its extra layer, that makes it not just a corny thing, about an old guy who's thankful for his young assistant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'll tie it back to Ella McKay. Even though it's not doing well in the box office, it doesn't mean it's a dud. It's um, it's worth seeing. I'll put it that way. But I'll move on to because it is trying to tap into that Frank Capra feeling, um, and it does it well in some ways. But anyway, the last movie I wanted to chat a little bit with you about is and I can't pronounce this. Janine or Jean,
John Dielman. Yeah.
John Dielman. Chantal Ackerman's 1975 masterpiece, and it's been made fun of by these lesser critics who say just too long. But that's the power of the movie because it is so long. If it was shorter, it would not have the same impact.
Right.
And I think that is a movie you see in a movie theater, and
Yeah.
maybe
I was
the
lucky
seat
enough
is
to, yeah.
if the seat's uncomfortable, that's fine.
Right. Yeah. I remember going to that it was probably like, I don't know, maybe 2002 or 2003. And it was at Anthology Film Archive. And it wasn't a movie that was readily available at the time. and the theater was full. And in my memory, they like oversold it and they just let people come like sit on the stairs and stuff. So it was like a packed theater, and we were sitting on, people were lining the aisle and sitting on the steps, probably breaking every fire code. And um, yeah, it's like you say, it's a movie to see in the theater because that's this, that's the cinematic experience is one where you don't get to pause it, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, if nothing else, it's like the movie is the thing, not you. Again, I'm coming back to that, right? Like it's that the movie is there, the movie is happening. A.S. Hamra, who's a critic I really like, this is his new book, um, or most recent book, but he was talking about that in an interview recently about one of the keys to what is the cinematic experience is that the movie is starting.
Mm.
Can be there or not, but the movie is on. And the movie is not at your mercy, you know.
Yeah.
Your relationship with the movie, it is the superior thing in the room, right?
Yeah.
And that's all flipped, right? When you're at home. And so there's something about that march of time in a movie like John Thielman, which becomes very different when you can pause it or break it up or choose to watch it in segments. Um, I mean, I watch movies in segments because, um, especially when both of the kids were younger, it was just, it was just very difficult to get through a 2 hour movie. And my choice was either watch movies in chunks or like don't watch movies,
Yeah.
so the choice was clear. But, I think people who, I mean, there's a lot about realpolitik that's just telling people um, what they are. If you're reading this comic, I'm telling you a bunch of stuff you already know. I'm not really the people who are think it's just this what's the difference between watching a movie at home and watching a movie in the theater, or what's the difference between watching a TV show and watching a movie, are probably not reading this strip. Um, but I do fear that it gets flattened, and that it won't, that they're I mean, that's what executives like Bob Iger want, right? They say over and over again. I mean, Hammer again talks about this, like they want us to believe that people don't want to go to the movies because they just want to put everything on streaming platforms,
Hmm.
because it's cheaper. They're wrong though. People do want to go to the movies. It's not the people, the audience is not the problem, and that's important to remember. And I hope that the strips in realpolitik where audience members are getting made fun of, um, it's clear that I don't think the audience is the problem. The fan is never the fan's the wrong word, but the person who's showing up at the theater is not the bad guy, even if they're eating noisy food or they showed up late or something like that. They're still your comrade in some sense. They still want to be in that movie theater with you.
Yeah. Well, for a comic strip punchline, I'd say, except when they've got a plastic thing they're crinkling, that drives me nuts. But I'm just,
I don't know, man. I let go of it all. I used to be a really uptight moviegoer, and I realized how tense it made me, and that it was really, even when there was nobody being rude, I was just so on edge waiting for it
oh, yeah, there you
that I
go.
wasn't enjoying movies anymore.
Yeah.
I was just like this hyper vigilant movie goer. And then I just was like, I just let go of it completely. And I
Yeah.
can relax now. And I can actually like watch the movie, you know?
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. Realpolitik. Unless I missed something, I mean, people can go to your website and when you're available, you can do commission art and you've got amazing prints available. Anything
Yeah.
else you
Oh, and
wanted to add?
thank you for mentioning that. I'm starting comics workshops too.
That's
So if
right.
anybody's interested in comics workshops, get in touch. Most of the strips in realpolitik are 6 panel comics, and I'm teaching workshops about creating one page, 6 panel comics. And I'm really excited about it. The first one is in 3 days, and that one will be in person here in Los Angeles at Scribble. And then a week later, I'm doing an online one. And I don't know when this will go up, but as of now, there's still spots available for that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being so enthusiastic about the book and going back through it even after you wrote your review.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll end it right there. And I wish you well. And I'll let you know when it goes up, or you may end up seeing it, but I'll send you an update.
Okay, great. Yeah, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Have a
All right.
great
Thanks
day.
again. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Bye bye.
All right.